Hey, this is Bernadette Joy, and you're watching Influencing Entrepreneurs.
After years of teaching entrepreneurship and consulting business owners, I realized that true knowledge comes from the wins and losses of those entrepreneurs. These are the stories of those business leaders. I'm Casimir Ward, and this is Influencing Entrepreneurs. Today we're with Bernadette Joy with Crush Your Money Goals. I want to get into the depth of what Crush Your Money Goals means today, but you were squeezing your money goals at that point.
I like that you said squeezing the money goals versus crushing them. That's pretty accurate, for sure.
So tell me a little bit about your background and how that led to Crush Your Money Goals.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I'm so glad that we're getting to reconnect because it was a reminder to me. Last time that we talked, I was in a very different phase of my business. So I started the personal finance journey in 2016, and it was out of my own personal need. I had $72,000 of student loan debt coming out of Chapel Hill, and I got my MBA thinking that the MBA was going to be the solving of, what's my existential next move in my
You mean
career.
you don't get an MBA and you automatically get a $50,000 raise?
Apparently not. So,
I learned that one the hard way myself.
I learned that the hard way also. And not only do you not get a $50,000 raise, but oftentimes, like me, you have to take out student loans. So now you're in debt. So I had $72,000 of student loans. I had no real game plan on what I wanted to do next. At the time, I had an idea for a business that would help women save money in the fashion world. I was very much into anything related to fashion. And so I started a business in Charlotte that was called Dressed, which was kind of a competitor to Rent the Runway. Long story short, on Dressed, I learned a lot about running a business and learning how to do operations, but I realized that the crux of the business, which is really in a very not sustainable type of industry, was not where I really wanted to spend my long-term career. Plus, retail is really tough
It's a grind.
on personal life. Absolutely. Like I was working weekends and nights, and I was just like, I don't know if I could do this for the long term.
So you went into the master's program knowing you wanted to go into entrepreneurship.
Yes. So when I was in the MBA program, I was working still as a recruiter at that time, but I knew I wanted to do something different. And so that's where I started exploring entrepreneurship. My concentration in my MBA program was actually entrepreneurship. And the dress business was one of my capstone projects that I actually turned into a real business, ran it for 3 years. I had really doubled down on learning personal finance for myself. I had paid off all $72,000 of student loans. I had also paid off my house by then. And I went from $300,000 of debt to no debt, and a paid off home at 30 something years old, and realizing, hey, I can take more risk now.
So while you're crushing your money goals and trying to get out of debt, do you realize before or after you're out of debt that you have something special here? Like, are you building as you go, or do you land the plane and then say, you know what, I could do this for other people?
I was definitely building as I go. I love that analogy of, I was flying and also building the plane. So in 2018, word kind of spread that I was this person here in Charlotte that somehow paid off $72,000 of student loans and was running a business and quit my corporate job. And so I kept getting asked for cups of coffee. People kept asking to pick my brain at the time. A lot of people don't know this, but I am a very strong introvert. So going out for cups of coffee was not something I wanted to do regularly. And I went to my husband one day and I said, I would really love if I could just record my response to people, because they're all asking me the same thing. Like, how did you pay off the student loans? How did you start a business? How did you do all that stuff? And he said, that's called a podcast, right? And I was like, oh, I'll do that. So we did intentionally. I recorded one season of a podcast in 2018.
How many episodes?
It was 10 episodes. And I did it more like an audiobook kind of thing, where it wasn't interviews, it was scripted. I took a lot of time to think about the questions that people often asked me and then answered those questions. And I did not have any intention of turning it into a business. It was just like, there's a problem that I need to solve. One is that a lot of people have questions on this type of information. The information that's out there is not very diverse in terms of like perspectives and kind of like old advice. And I think I can accomplish it in a 10 episode podcast, not realizing it would then eventually turn into what is now Crush Your Money Goals.
What is the difference between the old advice versus the new advice?
So it's interesting. I started out when I first was looking up how to pay off student loans. I did what any millennial would probably do is like I Googled how to pay off student loans. And the only thing I got was anything kind of related to Dave Ramsey. And here's the thing. I respect Dave Ramsey's business a lot. I learned a lot from that business, a lot of the principles that I agree with. One, I think it was a communication style, like not his style didn't necessarily resonate with everyone, but also there's just certain things that as a female, as a millennial, as someone who has $72,000 of student loan debt where he never experienced that himself personally. There's also some cultural differences. So often he would say, well, if you can't afford it, then don't go. But like for a lot of immigrant families, going to college is the way that you get out of poverty. My parents both went to college to be able to become accountants to move to America.
And these are the same people that tell you, well, if you don't want to work at McDonald's, you should work harder to get a better job. So it's kind of, I understand the point.
Yeah, right? It wasn't reaching certain audiences. And so for me, like the approach that I've taken is I can only speak for my own experience. And that's what I did for the first couple of years of my business was to say, okay, as a female, like what didn't resonate with me about that? As a 30-something-year-old with a ton of student loan debt, how does that not resonate with me? As someone who is newly married and not planning to have kids, for example, what things can I share with people about that? And so I tried to fill in gaps where I didn't see that there was advice out there for people who maybe didn't feel represented by traditional advice.
So you start building content with the podcast. And again, the podcast, I'm assuming, is just, I want to get my word out there. Personal branding at that point, which it sounds like that is, does that in itself become the course, or then do you build the course on top of that after that?
I built the course on top of that. So the podcast was more marketing and also starting to position myself as a thought leader in the space. The podcast led to doing a lot more television segments and here locally. And then I started getting calls from like Good Morning America to do TV segments and stuff like that. And so that's what started building the momentum of like, okay, there seems to be a very strong interest, particularly around paying off debt in this time period. And so that's where I started out with Crush Your Money Goals of just focusing on a target audience of anyone who wants to be able to pay off debt quicker. And then in 2020, I launched my first community of people, which was just online, getting people together and teaching them twice a month, like here are some strategies and things that you can do. And then in the end of 2020, I launched my first Flow Your Worth, which was like was like kind of the next iteration after paying off debt. Like if you paid off your debt, now what? And that's evolved into now like several courses and programs. And then we still have like a media arm that we do a lot of content that we get paid for now to do.
So let's talk about that first community. So building that first community, getting people to show up, is this a packed house? People don't realize like how big is this community to start with?
It's never been big. So that's what I think is interesting is I consider myself to be one of those people. It's odd for me to hear you say, oh, you see me everywhere, because I consider myself under the radar. And maybe that's because I compare sometimes to like kind of big names in personal finance. I've never had a large following. I've never had more than maybe 100 people in the community at a time. Right now, it sits around 50. What I decided to do in building my business was having like a loyal group of people that I could grow with versus like always trying to find new people all the time. And at the time in 2020, like this is when I think courses and communities like all blew up. Like everyone had a course.
Everybody, yes.
Everyone had a podcast. Everyone had a course. Everyone had like a community because that's all we could do in 2020. And I saw a lot of people who decided, they wanted a volume-based model. And I decided for myself, the first iteration of Crush Your Money Goals was, if I can find 100 women in particular who can pay off $10,000 of debt in a year, then we would have eliminated $1 million of debt in 1 year. And I was like, that's a good goal to start off with. I failed that first year. Like as in, when we kind of rounded out the numbers, it was maybe like around 50 women, but it was like $500,000 of debt.
Were they successful in doing that $10,000?
Yeah. So those women, what was interesting is that on average, it was like it was more than that. We had less women, but doing bigger numbers.
I was going to say, so I mean, really, the failure is really kind of in the eye of the beholder. The practicality and the execution worked just as it was designed. The breadth of the audience just wasn't. Which, I mean,
yeah,
that's actually, your proof of concept is spot on.
Yeah. And so that's like where I had to reconcile for myself. And I think anyone who goes into a content-based business or an education-based business or consulting-based business, I felt so much pressure of back then of like, oh, I need to get to X amount of followers online or I need to be able to have this many people in my community versus what's the actual impact I want people to have that would materially change their life. And I realized that the niche of people who actually want to spend a longer amount of time building a sustainable money routine is a much smaller group of people than people who just want to like a quick hit, get rich thing. And so I had to reconcile like, okay, what kind of business am I growing then at that point? And that's when I started to focus more on individualized coaching and doing smaller groups versus trying to go for like these big audiences like I saw Ramit do.
All this culminates to which is coming out shortly is your first book.
My first book, yeah.
Crush Your Money Goals.
I'll crush your money goals.
So you're now at a part where you're probably more to wealth generating at this point. How does that differ from Crush Your Money Goals?
Yeah. So for full transparency, and I think that's part of where the branding has come in very uniquely, is people who have been in my programs have seen my own finances. Like I don't hide any of those things. So in the span since we started Crush Your Money Goals, we paid off the $300,000 of debt. My husband and I have built our $1.7 million of net worth, where
through retirement, through
retirement, real estate. Actually, we are not homeowners.
Okay.
Which is always fascinating to people that I choose to rent, even though I can afford to buy a home. And so we built it through, like you said, buying and selling real estate. A lot of the net income from this business has gone into then investments. We have completely self-funded. I haven't taken a loan since my student loans. So we're debt-free on that. And what people find fascinating is that I am toying with the idea of retiring at 40, which would be in February of next year.
So you want to retire at 40, which means you've crushed your money goals. My concern or question would be is you've built this pot that retirement means kind of running the clock out eventually. Mm-hmm. What kind of concern or what is, how do you make that sustainable so it does last you through retirement?
Well, if people are interested, they should check out my courses because that's literally part of what I teach in my programs, where how I know that I can retire at 40 is because there's actually a mathematical formula to decide how much money you need in retirement. And the idea is if you have that money invested, then the money should keep growing while you're using it up. So theoretically, and again, this is theoretically, right, according to the research, it's called the Trinity study if anyone wants to nerd out on that. Right. But basically the theory is if you are withdrawing at a certain rate and you're keeping that relatively consistent, then you should not run out of money. Okay. So what's hard for me though, and it goes back to your question about concern, because people ask me that all the time. Why would you retire? Like you've built this great business, you've done all this other stuff. When I say retirement, it's that making money is not going to be one of my top priorities anymore. Meaning that I'm really looking forward to in my 40s to focus on my health, to spend more time with people I really like. Music is such a big portion of what makes me really happy, even though I have literally no musical skills. But if I get to go to, like this past weekend, I went to Brooklyn for 48 hours to go see one of my favorite artists who never comes to the US, and spending more time in other hobbies. There is an interesting shift, and that's part of what I'm excited about in Crush Your Money Goals, is to get people to think differently about retirement and also not worrying as much about running out of money versus running out of time.
Wrapping things up, a couple questions. The $72,000 that you amassed for student loans, was it worth it?
Oh, that is such a good question. You know what? I waffle on this. Some days I think it was, and some days I don't think it was. For me, it ended up being worth it because I had a plan on how to pay it off in a specific amount of time. Whereas a lot of people who have student loans, there's no timeline to when they're going to pay it off. And so it's like this thing that's just weighing on you. When people have asked me, is an MBA worth it? I think it's worth it as long as you have a plan on how to finance it in a way that's not going to take your freedom away from other things you want to do.
Based on that investment, and even you talk about your focus is personal financial literacy, what have you noticed that is different in personal financial literacy and business financial literacy?
I actually do a program for entrepreneurs that does personal finance, because if you can implement it in your day-to-day life, then it will translate well into your business. But I notice it doesn't translate the other way around. And maybe you've experienced this too. There's a lot of entrepreneurs who make a lot of money and then can still somehow have no money.
Yes. No, I see it often.
Right. So I think the fundamental differences, though, too, between business finance is I think there's a lot more emphasis on revenue, whereas in personal finance, there tends to be a lot more emphasis on expenses. And I think people who are good at both know how to balance the two.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you sharing your story with us today.
Yeah.
Appreciate you stopping by, and I look forward to and will continue to follow your journey.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for watching. To watch more episodes of Influencing Entrepreneurs, be sure to subscribe on YouTube at Nexagy Education.